Sponsored by Rabbi Shemini and Mirala Greenwald. This is a Sicha from Likutei Sichos, Chelek Beis, Parshas Shemini, Sicha Alef. And the topic of the Sicha is that in this week's Parsha we learn about the death of Nadav va'Avihu, and we learn a Rashi on it. And there are 4 parts in the Sicha. The Rebbe will, number 1, ask 6 questions on Rashi. Number 2, present the key to what is really bothering Rashi. Number 3, based on this, answer all 6 questions. And number 4, present the Inyonei Halacha and the Yena Shel Torah in Rashi. On the pasuk in our parsha, "Vateitze eish melifnei Hashem," and a fire went out before Hashem, "Vatoichel oisam," and it consumed them, referring to Nadav and Avihu, "Vayamusu lifnei Hashem," and they died before Hashem. So Rashi quotes the words "Vateitze eish," and a fire went out, and he explains that there are 2 opinions over here for why Nadav and Avihu died. Rabbi Lezer says, "Lo meisu bnei Aaron elal yedei shahiru halacha b'fnei Moshe Rabban." The sons of Aaron only died through this, that they taught halacha in front of Moshe their Rebbe. That's the opinion of Rabbi Lezer. Rabbi Shmuel argues with this. Rabbi Shmuel says, "Shesuya yayin nichnasu lamikdash." The reason they died is because they entered the mikdash after having drunk wine. Teida, you should know that this is true. Sha'achar misasan hizar nesarim shalayikansu shesuya yayin lamikdash. Because after they died, we find right away afterwards there's a command where he warned the remaining sons of Aaron that they should not enter the mikdash after having drunk wine. And he concludes, Mashal a melech shahayale ben bias v'chulu. There's a mashal to this from a king that had a ben bias v'chulu, etc. K'de'isa b'v'yikar rabba, like it's taught over there in v'yikar rabba, this mashal, and we'll see the mashal in full later in the Sicha. And there are 6 questions over here. The first question is, the reason for the death of the sons of Aaron, of the Bnei Aaron, is written clearly in the pasuk. It says in the previous pasuk, "Vayakruvu l'fnei Hashem eiz zara asher lo tziva isam." They brought in front of Hashem an eiz zara that they were not commanded to bring, and therefore the next pasuk, our pasuk says, "Vateitze eish gomer," fire went forth, "Vayamusu gomer," and they died. And so there isn't any need for any explanation at all. So why do we have a Rashi over here? It seems when we read the psukim, we see clearly why they died. The second question is that even though it seems that there's no need for an explanation from Rashi over here at all, nevertheless, Rashi gives an explanation, and he gives one that doesn't seem to fit it with Pshuta Shemikra, because in Pshuta Shemikra, the reason they died is because they brought an Eish Zara. And here Rashi gives us 2 other explanations. He says that those are the reasons that they died. The third question is, since Rashi is explaining why they died, so then he should have quoted from the pasuk the word Vayamusu. He's explaining to us Vayamusu, why did they die? And he should not have quoted the words Vateitze eish. The fourth question is, we know that when Rashi gives 2 explanations for something, it's because each one has difficulties that the other one doesn't have. And in addition, the one that he brings first is the one that has less or smaller difficulties. And so the question over here is, what are the difficulties on each of the explanations of Rashi, and in what way is the first explanation of Rashi better than the second explanation? The fifth question is, like we said many times, that if Rashi, in his explanation, brings the name of the opinion that says this teaching, which is not what he does most of the time, it's in order to add explanation to what he said. And so we have to understand over here, what do we learn from this, that Rashi tells us the Rabbi Lezer and Rabbi Shmuel were the ones that said these teachings? What do we learn from this, that Rashi tells us their names? And the 6th question is, Rashi's explanation, as is known, is extremely precise. And so we have to understand, when Rashi quotes the words of the Medrash, he says, Mashal a melech, it's a mashal to a king, Shahayala ben Bias, who had a ben Bias v'chulu, k'de'isa b'v'yikar rabba, like it's tuna v'yikar rabba. We have to understand over here, if Rashi's intent is just to tell us which Medrash he's referring to, and it's up to the person learning it to then look into the Medrash and study it, so then he should have written in short. At the very most, he should have written Mashal melech v'chulu. it's a mashal to a king, etc., like it says in Vayikra Rabbah. And if Rashi's intent is to also tell us the content of the mashal, then just saying those first few words doesn't help. And so therefore we have to say that when Rashi adds, he says, not just Mashal Melech, but he adds Shahoyaloi ben Beis, it means that this is a very important detail for understanding his Pirush. And so we have to understand what is it that we learn through those words that Rashi adds, Shahoyaloi ben Beis, that these are such integral and important words to Rashi's explanation. In what way are they so integral and so important? Now we're going to move on to the key of the Sicha, and once we present the key of the Sicha, it's going to lead into all the answers to our questions on Rashi. And the key of the Sicha is going to be to understand what's really bothering Rashi. And once we understand what's really bothering Rashi, then we'll understand everything that Rashi says, because by saying what he says, that's how Rashi answers this question, which is the question that's really bothering him. So the explanation of all of this is as follows. Since Rashi quotes the words Vateitze Eish, so we could see over here we're already beginning to answer the third question. Why does Rashi quote the words Vateitze Eish and not Vayamusu? So since Rashi quotes the words Vateitze Eish, this indicates that there's a difficulty in these words that compelled him to explain Loimeisu b'nei Aaron ela yedei v'chulu. That's what compelled him to explain the reason for the death of the b'nei Aaron. So now, the general manner of the death of the Bnei Aaron is understood, since it's Midah Keneged Midah. They were punished with Vateitze Eish because of their Aveira of bringing an Eish Zara. But it's difficult over here. And that is, how can we say in Pshuta Shemikra that with the words Vateitze Eish, the Torah is describing the harshest of punishments, which is the punishment of death, of Misa, when just two psukim beforehand, the Torah described with these very same words, Vateitze Eish, the greatest of rewards, which was the Hashras Hashchina, which was recognized through Vateitze Eish, like it says in the pasuk, just two psukim before this pasuk. It says Vateitze Eish milifnei Hashem, Vateichal ala mizbeach es ha'olav es ha'chalavim, Vayar kol ha'om, Vayaroinu vayiplu al. So through the words Vateitze Eish, the Torah over there describes the greatest of rewards. And this is the difficulty that Rashi has. And this is what's really bothering Rashi over here, and it's because of this that Rashi says what he says. So we're going to begin now with the main point of the answer. And here we're going to answer the first question that we had on Rashi. The first question was that the reason for the death of the sons of Aaron is written clearly in the pasuk, and there isn't any need for any explanation at all. So actually, because of this difficulty of Rashi, that the words Vateitze Eish, just two psukim before our pasuk, were used to describe the greatest of rewards, and now the words Vateitze Eish in our pasuk are being used to describe the greatest of punishments. So because of this difficulty, it compels Rashi to explain that also the Vateitze Eish by the death of the Bnei Aaron is a me'ein of Ashras Hashchina. If the Torah is using the same words Vateitze Eish over here, like it used two psukim before this pasuk to describe the Ashras Hashchina, it means that also the Vateitze Eish over here is a me'ein of Ashras Hashchina. So this is an explanation in Pshuta Shemikra. And it's only because there was something lacking in the way they acted during this Avodah that therefore they died. Because if it's a me'ein of Ashras Hashchina, because the Avodah itself was an Avodah Kedosha, so why did they die? It must be that there was something lacking in the way they acted during this Avodah. And this is all in Pshuta Shel Mikra. So when we just look at the psukim isolated on their own, then we say that it seems clear why they died. They died because they brought an Eish Zara. But once we see this question of Rashi, that it says Vateitze Eish over here, just like it says just two psukim before our pasuk for Ashras Hashchina, that shows us that also over here when it says Vateitze Eish and Pshuta Shel Mikra, it must mean that there is a me'ein of Ashras Hashchina over here, because the Avodah itself that they performed was an Avodah Kedosha, and the reason they died must be that there was something lacking in the way they acted during this Avodah. As Rashi gives two explanations for that, and as we'll see as we move on in the Sicha, how those two explanations fit very well in Pshuta Shel Mikra, which was the second question on Rashi. That Rashi, it gives an explanation that doesn't fit in Pshuta Shel Mikra. We'll see how those two explanations do fit very well in Pshuta Shel Mikra. So we're going to begin by looking at the first answer in Rashi. So because of this difficulty, that we can't say the actual Avodah itself was not good, but rather to the contrary, that was an Avodah G'daisha, and we have to say that the reason they died was because something that was lacking in the way they acted during this Avodah. So that's why Rashi writes, and we're going to insert words over here to show how it fits with this explanation, that Lo Mesu B'nei Aaron Al Yedei Avodah, they didn't die through the Avodah, because the Avodah was an Avodah G'daisha. Ella, but rather they only died Al Yedei Shaheru Halacha, through this that they taught a halacha, zu, this very halacha, the akravas eish, of bringing this fire b'fnei Moshe Rabban, in front of Moshe the Rebbe. And it's not a contradiction to what it says in the pasuk, that the reason what they did is that they brought an eish zara asher leitziva isam, and that was the problem, because to the contrary, these words imply that it was an eish zara only because leitziva isam. It wasn't inherently an eish zara; it was actually an avodah kedosha. What made it an eish zara? Because asher leitziva isam, because they weren't commanded to do it, but rather they taught it to themselves. And nevertheless, even though it's inherently an avodah kedosha, it's still called an eish zara, similar to what's written by the Ketores. It says Ketores zara, which means zara slay. Anything that doesn't belong there is going to be described as zara. And so this didn't belong there because they weren't taught to do it by Moshe, but rather they taught it to themselves in front of Moshe Rabban. However, and so with that we answered our part of our second question, how it fits in Pshuto Shemikra, at least the first answer. And now we're going to move on to answer part of the fifth question. Why does Rashi tell us the name Rabbi Lezer? So, however, it's a little difficult to say that they deserve such a harsh punishment for this. Why did they deserve such a harsh punishment if the Avodah is an Avodah Kedosha? And it's only that they were Ahiru Allacha b'fnei Moshe Rabban. And Rashi hints to the answer by quoting the name of Rabbi Lezer, because lofty and great praises were said about Rabbi Lezer, describing his great strength and his great wisdom in Torah. And nevertheless, it was Rabbi Lezer who said that that someone who says something that he didn't hear from the mouth of his Rebbe, he causes the Shechina to leave the Yidden. And this is a Kavul Chemer to the case over here by Nadav and Avihu, when a person says it in front of Rabbi, because Rabbi Lezer was only talking about somebody who says something that he didn't hear from his Rebbe. Here we have that they're doing this, not just saying it and doing it, and they're doing it in front of the Rebbe himself. They're doing it in front of Moshe Rabbeinu. And so we see from Rabbi Lezer how severe such a thing is, and that therefore they deserve to die. Now we're going to move on to discuss the second answer. And we're going to start off by pointing out what's the difficulty with the first answer. So this is a partial answer to our fourth question, what's difficult in each of the answers, that therefore Rashi brings two answers, and also why are the difficulties in the second answer greater, that because of those difficulties are greater, therefore Rashi brings it as the second answer, and he brings the first one that has smaller difficulties first. So we're going to point out the difficulties in the first answer. But this first answer isn't fully understood. It's not entirely good. Because then the question is from the other direction. Now that we explained the severity of what they did, so since by bringing this Ketores, they taught halacha b'fnei Rabban, and they caused the Shechina to leave, like Rabbi Lezer says, so how can it be that through it they also caused Vateitzei Eish, a me'in of Ashras HaShechina? And because of this, therefore Rashi brings a second explanation, that Shesuya Yayin Nichnasu LaMikdash, they entered the Beis Mikdash after having drunk wine. Because according to this answer, we're discussing an Avera that they weren't commanded about yet. And therefore they're bringing the Ketores itself, that was B'Shleimus, without any Avera. And so it's understood why you're brought about Vateitzei Eish Hashras HaShechina, because like we said, it was just a pure Avodah Kedosha. And it's just that there was an Avera about which they weren't yet commanded. And that's also why Rashi says, you should know, because after their death, he warned the remaining ones that they shouldn't enter after having drunk wine to the Mikdash. Because with this, Rashi is coming to tell us not just a proof for this answer, that, look, they were given the command right afterwards, so it shows it's connected. But also the advantage in this explanation, that they didn't do any Avera by bringing the Ketores, since they weren't given the command yet. And it's not a question, we said, how does it fit in Pshuto Shemikra from what it says, Eish Zara Asher Lo Tziva Isam. It sounds like the Avera was that they brought an Eish Zara Asher Lo Tziva Isam. So according to the first answer, we said it was only an Eish Zara because they weren't commanded to do it. But according to this answer, we're saying there's no issue that they did something in front of Moshe Rabban. So what does it mean, Eish Zara Asher Lo Tziva Isam? Because Isam implies that he did command others to bring this Eish. It wasn't something that was against the command. Actually, it was commanded. And the only explanation for why they weren't commanded, now why would it be they weren't commanded but others were? What could be the explanation for why they weren't commanded even though they were so great? The only explanation was because of something that happened at that time. And that is that they were Shesuya Yayin. So the way we read it is that they brought a Zara Asher Lo Tziva Isam. And why Asher Lo Tziva Isam? If he commanded others, if Hashem commanded others, for sure they would be commanded as well. They were on such a high level. It must be that they weren't commanded because of a detail at that time. And what's that detail? That Shesuya Yayin, that they had, it was right after they had drunk wine, and therefore it was not for them. And so that's how we see how it fits into the Pshuto Shel Mikra as well. However, according to this explanation, the question is why they were punished and so harshly, if all they did is an aver that they weren't commanded about yet. And to answer this, Rashi says, Mashal Melech Shahaya Loi Ben Bayis V'chulu K'di Isa B'Veika Rabba. Rashi quotes the words Shahaya Ben Bayis, because those are the words we have to keep in mind that are going to answer to us why they were punished and so harshly. So it says over there in the Medrash, Mashal Melech Shahaya Ben Bayis Neman. There was a king that had a trustworthy Ben Bayis, Mitzah Oimed al Pesach Chanuyas. He found him standing by the doors of stores. V'hitiz es roishe b'shtika. He quietly severed his head. He killed him. Umina Ben Bayis acher tachtav. And he appointed a different Ben Bayis in his place. Ve'ein anu yoidim mimpnei ma haragas arishin. We don't know why did he kill the first one. Alimimasha mitzaves hasheni. V'omar. Rather from this that he commands the second one and said to him, don't go into the doors of stores. We know that it's because of that he killed the first one, that he was hanging around, which is an inappropriate thing for a Ben Bayis of the king. So from the Medrash it's understood that even though the first one wasn't commanded about it, but since he was a Ben Bayis of the king, he should have understood it on his own. And Rashi hints to this by adding the words Ben Bayis, that they were Nodav and Aviyah, they were Bnei Bayis by Hashem, and they should know it on their own. They should know on their own not to be Shesuya Yayin. So the key words of the Medrash, so here we're answering the sixth question on Rashi. Why does Rashi quote the words Ben Bayis? Because those are the key words to answer this big question. Why were they punished and so harshly for an aver that they weren't commanded about yet? Because they were Bnei Bayis of Hashem. And as Bnei Bayis, there's certain things they should have known on their own. Just like in the mashal over there of the king. And now we're going to move on to answer more about the fifth question of Rashi. Why does Rashi say the name over here of Rabbi Yishmael? But still, it's not fully understood why the Bnei Aaron are punished with a severe death for something they weren't commanded about. Still, even though they should have known, but they have to get such a severe punishment. And it's because of this difficulty that Rashi adds, this is the explanation of Rabbi Yishmael. Because it says about Rabbi Yishmael in the Gemara, Kahana Messiah Kahani. He himself was a Kohen, and he was looked out to help other Kohanim. And so Rabbi Yishmael prefers to help and be lenient with the Bnei Aaron HaKohanim, even if it doesn't fit so well in the Psukim. He'd rather say that their Avera wasn't so big, that they did a small Avera, even though there will be a difficulty, why was their punishment so great? He'd rather say that than to explain the Psukim in such a way that it fits better, but it makes their Avera bigger. So Rashi is answering to us, why did they get such a punishment? The truth is it doesn't fit so well that they got such a punishment. But this is the opinion of Rabbi Yishmael, and Rabbi Yishmael prefers to say that they got such a big punishment for a smaller Avera than to explain that their Avera was great, and that's why they got a great punishment. And now we're going to move on to answer the fourth question, complete answering the fourth question. We're going to present what are the difficulties with this answer of Rashi, and why they're greater than the difficulty that we said that there is on the first answer. However, because number one it says Vayikruvu lifnei Hashem eish zara, it calls it an eish zara, which implies that there was something wrong with the akrava itself. And number two, since there wasn't any avera with the akrava of the eish, so why were they punished with vatetzei eish? Why did they get punished with an eish? According to the first answer, it was an eish zara because they did it in front of Moshe, their teacher. And they got punished with Eish because they did something wrong with the Eish. They did it in front of their teacher. They were Hayru Halacha B'fnei Moshe Rabban. So because of these two difficulties, therefore Rashi isn't satisfied with this explanation. And not only isn't he fully satisfied with it, these difficulties are so great that he only brings it as a second explanation. From the Inyonei Halacha and Rashi. Rashi writes, Shahiru Halacha b'fnei Moshe Rabban, just like it is in Gemara. And he doesn't write Shahiru Halacha b'fnei Rabban, without writing Moshe. And the question is, why does Rashi have to add the name Moshe over here? And it's even more difficult, since there seems to be over here an even more severe Avera than Hahiru Halacha b'fnei Moshe Rabban. And that is that they did it in front of Aaron, who was both Rabban and their father. And in addition, what they did, which was bringing an Ezara, the Ketores, was connected to the Avodah of Aaron. So they were like taking away the Avodah of Aaron. So it would seem that just writing Bifnei Rabban would be better, because it also includes Aaron, which seems to be a more severe Avera, because he was both their father and Rabban, and in addition, they were taking his Avodah. And the explanation is, we find in the Dinim of a Seba that a Talmud who was sitting in front of his Rav, even if it's not Rabbi Muvak, his prominent Rav, he's not permitted to lean in front of him because of Meira, the covet of the Rav, unless his Rav gave him permission. But there is no obligation on the Rav to give him permission and be Meichel his honor. Whereas by one's father, so it says that even if he is Rabbi Muvak, he must lean, since the father is probably Meichel his honor for his son. And so too here, even though their mitzvah and chiyuv of honoring their Rav and father, Aaron, is greater than their mitzvah and chiyuv of honoring Moshe Rabban, nevertheless, it's less severe. Their lack of honor to their Rav and father Aaron, since the father is probably Meichel his son. And this also sweetens why Rashi says B'nei Aaron, even though we know it's talking about them. Rashi says Leimesu B'nei Aaron. We know it's talking about B'nei Aaron. Why does Rashi say it? Because that explains to us that since we're talking about B'nei Aaron, therefore it's understood that Leimesu B'nei Aaron Elo al Yedei Shahiru Halacha B'fnei Moshe Rabban. Since we're talking about B'nei Aaron, so the only explanation can be that they were Hahiru Halacha b'fnei Moshe Rabban and not b'fnei Aaron Rabban, because since they were the B'nei Aaron, so we assume and we say that probably Aaron was Meichel them, and the only explanation left for why they died is that they were Hahiru Halacha b'fnei Moshe Rabban. From Yenashal Torah and the Hira from Rashi, so even though the level of Nadav and Avihu was very high, to the extent that Moshe said to Aaron about them, Shehem G'deilim Mimeni Umimcha, they're greater than me and you. And Hashem said about them, he called them B'Kroivai, which Rashi says means B'Bchirai. So they were so great, nevertheless they were punished with a severe punishment because of their lack of proper bittul to their Rav. And Rashi then brings down Rabbi Lezer. And Rabbi Lezer, despite his great strength and wisdom in Torah, he's the one who says, Ha'emer davar shalishama min pi Rabbi, geirim l'shchina shetistalkim Yisrael. Someone who's lacking in bittul to his Rav. So that bittul matters to the gilui of the Shechina, to the entirety of Klal Yisrael, because he causes l'shchina shetistalkim Yisrael. And so from here we see a person shouldn't say, I'm a great lamdan and Talmud Chacham, and how can I be bottled to a Rav and wait for his direction in halacha, his direction on worldly matters, and his direction regarding the path in Avodas Hashem. A person can't say this. So that's the first part of the Yenashal Torah in Heira from Rashi. And then Rashi continues and tells us about Shesuya Yayin. What that teaches us is that on the other hand, it's demanded of each person that is learning Torah should be based on his understanding, and in a way that he's fully immersed in it. And that's what Rashi says, Shesuya Yayin Nichnasu Lamikdash, because Yayin is Bina, and Shesuya Yayin represents that a person is fully immersed in Bina. And the only issue over there was not that they were Shesuya Yayin. Shesuya Yayin is required from a person. The issue was that it was Nichnasu Lamikdash. Nichnasu Lamikdash means that it was at the time of Tefillah, and Tefillah is a time when a person has to be completely batal. But when it comes to Limud Torah, there it has to be Yayin, and it has to be Shesuya Yayin. And like the Rebbe brings a story from Rabbi Huda Bar Ilai that he looked like he was Shesuya Yayin, because that's how he was Beruchnis, and it affected him so strongly all the way down into Gashmis that's how it affected how he looked. And when one has complete bittul in Tefillah, that when it comes to Nichlasul Mikdash, they're not just yayin. It helps the person have the proper bittul also while learning Torah, that the person can bring that bittul into limited Torah. However, there's a question here, and that is, how is it possible to combine these two opposites in learning Torah? That on one hand, the person should be yayin and shesuya yayin, completely immersed in his own understanding. On the other hand, there should be the person should be batul, should have total bittul of his mitzias. And the answer to that is given in the continuation of Rashi, that combining these two opposites comes from being a ben bias of Hashem. That's what Rashi says, Mashal HaMelech Shayla ben bias. That since we're talking over here about Yidden, that Yidden are a ben bias of Hashem, so Hashem gives a Yid the ability and the strength to combine opposites, that a Yid should be able to learn Torah with his understanding and at the same time to have the proper bittul, to the extent that through this a person can bring together another two opposites, which are the opposites of the world and the opposite of Elikus, that a person can combine the world and Elikus, that the world should conduct itself according to the way that the person psak din of the person learning Torah in his maskana, like the Gemara says about lakel gamer olai, that the psak din in Torah actually affects the physical reality in the world, and through this a person brings about v'nigla kvei davaya v'roch al basar yachtav k'bi avaya dibber, that even the basar should be able to see Elikus with the coming of Mashiach Tzidkenu.